Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Hey, hey, hey. Welcome to Woo Rank After Dark. It's not actually dark yet, but this is considerably later than we usually do our webinars. So you're welcome, America. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments just while we wait for some people to trickle in. And also, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe so that I don't get in trouble with my bosses, but that also so that you can get really good content. Whenever we go live, you'll get a notification. You'll also be alerted if ever we have a cool video coming out or new criteria. So really important that you subscribe to our channel. Very, very important. So just let us know where you are coming from in the comments, and so we can say hey to you. I'm sure we have some of our regulars showing up today as well. And Nils, thanks for joining us again.
Good evening.
Good evening. Watching
there we go.
Oh, hey, West End Gallery. What's up? What's up? Nils, I hear a little bit of an echo from my voice, just like a tiny bit.
Yep.
Not that I don't love hearing myself talk, if you guys have watched webinars before.
How's that?
Better, I
Okay.
think. Yeah, better. Okay, so we've got our West End Gallery, not a 4 a.m. webinar. Yay, hooray. Yes, we did this for you. Hey, Andrew, what's up? All right, we've got a healthy amount of people. 3 R's Construction, watching from Salem, Oregon. Hello. So that's good. We've got a healthy amount of viewers watching. Why don't we go ahead and get started? So without further ado, if you've been reading the emails that we've been sending you, you know that today we're going to be talking all about website accessibility. Website accessibility is not really as I guess forward as you think it might be. It's not just having to do with, can someone type in my web address, click go, and then get to my website? That's not really what we mean by website accessibility. We really want to make sure that your website is as accessible and that anyone of any walk of life is able to interact with your website. So recently, we've added a few criteria to our website. Hi, Lucia. Hi from Spain. We've added a few criteria from our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen here. Oh, let me get Nils in the picture here too. All right. So this should look familiar to you. I know I say this every single webinar. This is the WooRank review. If this doesn't look familiar to you, go to woorank.com, sign up for a 2-week free trial. You'll be able to see all of the goodness that we're about to show you. So as you know, within our WooRank review, we're constantly tweaking and we're constantly trying to add new criteria and make sure that we are really judging your site based on the most available information and what we know for a fact is going to help your users to be able to have the best possible experience on your website. You know, as we've said it again and again, it's not just about what Google cares about. It's about how well is your website performing for your visitors and for your users. So we've got this brand new section, the accessibility section. Now, as I said before, accessibility is not just, can I visit your website? This is about much more than that. So we now have these 2 extra criteria. We have something called contrast and something called navigation. Now, Nils, in all his glory and all his technical glory, is going to tell us all about what that means from a technical standpoint. But just to give you an overview, this is to make sure that anybody is able to access your website. And when we say anybody, we mean anybody who may have a disability, anybody who may be using a different browser, anybody that may want to achieve something differently on your site, i.e. maybe they're not using a mouse, maybe they're using just their keyboard to navigate around your website. So it has a whole lot of different elements incorporated with that. But ultimately, we're just making sure that your website is accessible no matter who is trying to do what on your website. That being said, just before Nils goes into his explanation for what these different criteria mean, just because you have 2 green checks here doesn't necessarily mean that all of your accessibility criteria have been checked off. There are certain criteria within our review that may not be categorized as an accessibility criteria, but might also fall into that metric. So for instance, if you have alt attributes on all of your images, that also is a part of accessibility, but it's also really on-page SEO. So really, I mean, thesis statement is make sure that you look at every criteria on the WooRank review and make sure that you understand what it is that we're asking you and what it is that will actually help your users. And after that long-winded intro, I'm going to hand it over to Nils so we can take a deeper dive into the color contrast type criteria. Nils?
Yes. So indeed, I think color contrast was the first item in our new accessibility section. Yeah, not that we're making favorites or picking favorites, but I think contrast is just in general something that's often overlooked. Yeah, even myself or WooRank included, like you try to design nice looking websites, web pages, landing pages, home pages, tools, and whatnot. But yeah, contrast is one of those things that is sometimes overlooked. No foul or any harm intended, but yeah, just something that looks nice to you might not necessarily look nice to somebody else. And of course, an example is people who have some sort of issue with their eyes, be it color blindness or have difficulty seeing certain things. But another thing, and that's one of those reasons you hinted on earlier. It's you don't have to have an issue with your eyes. Some people even have their screens not well configured. Like there's a contrast setting, brightness. There's a bunch of settings. Generally, people buy a screen, take it out of the box, and it's done. Don't mess with the settings. So even for people who don't necessarily have something with their eyes, it's also important to always make sure contrast is great. And even adding to that is it's not a new feature, but at least in Mac OS X, for instance, it's a newish feature. You have similar things on mobile phones. There's applications for Windows and Linux, for that matter. Called night shift. I think that's the term that Apple coins it. I don't know if it's a generalized term, but anyway, that feature where at night and you can set the hour accordingly, your screen becomes a little more yellowish, and the idea behind it is that by the end of the day you want to give your eyes some rest. And go less on the bluish colors that are, as research shows, much heavier on your eyes, your brain. So it will be very difficult, or it will harm your sleep, basically. Like lots of blue light throughout the day has an impact on how you sleep overnight. So these features, night shift or tools, I think there's a tool called Flux. These features help your eyes settle down. But also those tools, when they change your screen coloring, they take away a little bit from the overall contrast. So also thinking about those or people using that, and since it in some operating systems it's now a native setting, more and more people will be using such tools. And so again, that's why contrast is super important for literally everybody. So and again, often overlooked. So that's why we included that as our first criterion in the accessibility section. Maybe if you can pull up my my screen. This is a review for Wikipedia. I think Wikipedia is probably the Rosetta Stone of accessibility. They're all green across the board. They put a lot of effort into making information available to everybody, and that means literally everybody. Again, they're the best at doing this. There's obviously lots of other sites who do a very good job as well. Wikipedia, known to everybody, I guess. So that's why I brought them up. But there's other sites who could do better. Let's see what Apple does in terms of accessibility. They make some mistakes. So even Apple, most valuable company in the world, I think, even they might have some people designing the website and not looking at contrast to the fullest. So what's in our contrast criterion? Yeah, the elements on your website that don't have a good contrast ratio. And the contrast ratio, probably easier to open the tip, is the difference in coloring between an element that has text and HTML, so an element on your web page that has some text in there, the color of that text on top of the background, and then the difference, kind of a mathematical calculation. And yeah, those numbers, the ratio of difference between those colors should cross a certain threshold. And the threshold is 4.5/1 for small text and 3/1 for larger text. Larger text generally easier to read anyway out of the box. And large text, I think it's in the tip here, is either 18 points or 14 points when it's bold text. So there's a couple of a lot of math going on over there. And so when the ratio for certain elements isn't hit on your website, we'll flag that as an issue, and we'll show you what the element is that is causing the issue, and then some preview of what that actual color contrast for that element and the text will be. Now, of course, a ratio, ratio compared to a threshold, those are numbers on the screen. How do you fix those? Well, there's, if you just Google, and I think the website is called contrast ratio, well, contrast ratio calculator, but contrastratio.com will help you pick and choose. So you can here put in like you would color or pick color on a website, and say, okay, I wanna test red on white. It's very heavy. But here, it's 3.9. So when we go back to our formula, so a little below 4, for small text, it's already an issue. When you put like that heavy red on a white background, for small text, it won't be accepted in in the rules of contrast ratios. Obviously, black or dark gray, like this, dark gray, it's just gray. Black on white is obviously going to be probably the most 21. So that's across the board going to be nice. But at the same time, you can put in hexadecimal colors in here, or RGB values, stuff like that. So this is a great tool to play around with. Another one that works very similar, and basically a website that I wanted to touch on anyway, when we're talking about accessibility, is DEC University, DQ. I don't know how you pronounce this name. Courtney, do you have a...
I would say it's a deck, but I'm not familiar with this specific.
Well, anyway, so let's pick deck, and I hope we don't offend anyone by pronouncing it.
Anyone, let us know in the comments if we're not pronouncing it right, if you're familiar.
But anyway, they're the ones listing a bunch of rules that are important to make your website as accessible as possible. And it's also these rules we apply in our criteria. Not all of them yet. We're still working on adding them to our reviews, but contrast, for instance, is one in that longish list of rules that if you want to be perfect, this is the list to look at. But for contrast specifically, they also have a similar-ish type of tool, maybe even a little easier to play around with, because here you can fumble a bit with the coloring and the lightness of the color, and then see how well it does in terms of ratios. And here underneath you see, okay, will it pass, will it fail to reach certain accessibility standards? If everything is green, you're golden, I suppose. So another great tool. Again, we'll link them down in the description. All of the links that we're talking about today.
And I did a quick Google search. We were dead wrong.
I.
It's DQ.
DQ. Okay.
DQ University. So
Apologize.
rewind.
Yep.
Anyway, proceed.
All right. No, so this is contrast color. Again, super important for many different reasons. This is a screenshot I wanted to show earlier. So that's that night shift mode. Overnight. Sorry, when at night, I guess by default at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, it will slowly adjust the coloring of your screen to a more yellowish type of color. And then contrast will also be impacted. So there you go. That's our contrast criterion.
Great. Okay, so I guess we can just move right along. And before we do, does anyone have any questions about color contrast or any comments? Have you noticed that your review had changed a little bit? Did you notice that you passed it or you failed it? Were you pleased? Were you really mad at us for adding more criteria? Let us know in the comments. And then I guess while we're waiting for your comments to roll in, we can dive right into the navigation criteria. So as I briefly touched on before, navigation is more than just, do you have a way on your homepage to get to other pages? It's not really all about that. There's a lot more that goes into, is your site easily navigable by people regardless of what type of computer they're using or whether they prefer to use a mouse or use just their keyboard. Nels, I'm sure you can explain it with a lot less hesitation than I can.
Yep, I certainly can. And to explain navigation, our navigation criteria, and I'll pull it up over here.
Yeah, I've got it on mine. I have one that has.
Yep. Well,
fails,
we're
but
still.
I can yours up. Hold on. There you go. Yeah, either way.
Yep. Okay, there we go. So this is still Apple. And I don't want to pick on Apple. I have Apple products all over, so just using them as an example. So second item that is obviously also very important when it comes to making a website accessible is navigation. And by navigation, we mean, or the rules mean, how easy is it to navigate a website. So it's not just about a top navigation or a menu one way or the other. It's really about, for instance, if you have a form on a website or a web page, how easy can people scroll through that form to fill it in? So thinking about people who are not able to use a mouse, for instance, or who can only use a keyboard for that matter, how easy is it for them to jump from field to field, fill it in, submit your form? Is it nicely clean throughout all of the fields, or do they jump all over the place? That's obviously not something you want to, or that's not the type of user experience you want to present to people. So that's that's an example of having a good accessible website. So there's a couple of things we're testing, 5 to be precise. And that's the 5 checks, and again they're also listed by DQ University, somewhere in that list of 80 plus items. But the way of presenting the data over here is we're following Google Lighthouse. So Google Lighthouse. We've talked hours about this, more in the context of core web vitals and performance, but also Lighthouse in Google Chrome can be used to check accessibility of your website. And I'll just run a quick report on Wikipedia, just on the accessibility section. Like I said before, good example, Wikipedia, because they score 100, of course. They have a bunch of tests they're running here too. Well, I actually wanted to show, and I think by now I've mentioned this website every week, every time we did a webinar, the web.dev website, hosted by Google, managed by Google, content written by Google. They also have an entire section about accessibility. making your website accessible to all, as they state here on top. So this is a very good resource just in general about understanding what accessibility is, why you're doing it, how you're helping people, how you're helping certain groups of people making your website accessible. And then they spend, of course, a bunch of content pieces about the individual checks. And under the navigation section, that's the 5 checks we do also in our WooRank reviews. We can automate that for you when you have a project. So that's, I think, what we bring to the table when running these type of tests. When you're managing your project, this is something we constantly monitor for you. So under navigation, 5 items. I won't go in too much detail into those because that would take us hours. But we're checking for access keys values who should be unique. So this is the problem with access keys is that it's not always supported by browsers. So in general, it's actually advised to not even use access keys at all. Access keys being something you can add to HTML to certain sections in the page, where you allow people to say, okay, my Finder, my search bar over here, for instance, in the HTML, I programmed the access key F for find, for instance, or S for search. And then when someone presses the F or the S key, they'll jump into the Finder. It's something that's been in HTML for many years, but it's advised against it because it's not for the best user experience. Like how should people know that it's F or S that brings you to the Finder? So there are some best practices. But anyway, these should be, if you're using them, they should be unique, of course, because if you use F for more elements, then again people start jumping around. That's not the idea when you want to be accessible. Page does not contain heading, skip link, or landmarks. Again, this article explains it really well, but it's again around keyboard navigation, making your website easy to navigate when you can only use a keyboard. When you use IDs on HTML elements, of course, an ID should always be unique. It's not just for accessibility reasons, but you use ID to identify something individually. Otherwise, if you want to group things together, you'd rather use a class, for instance. So ID should be unique. Again, this doesn't only apply to accessibility. It's across the board something you should always make sure is not the case. But we'll check it here. Heading elements, so the headers, I think that's what you mentioned in the very beginning, Courtney, H1, H2, H3, just like you're reading a book or a long piece of text with a table of contents. You'll go from H1, a subsection of that would be H2, a subsection of that would be H3. Never put an H6 in an H1 and an H5 on top of that, common sense probably, but there's many sites still out there who don't have a clear and nice, let's call it table of contents based on their headers. So really make sure that it makes sense. General rule of thumb, it's not a requirement anymore, but is to have one H1 for each page, and then underneath that your H2s and your H3s. So make sure that navigation of headers is nicely ordered and structured.
No, we did, just before you move on, we did actually have a question about that earlier.
Sure.
So West End Gallery said, I seem to be failing. Let me just pop it onto the screen quickly. I seem to be failing in heading elements, not in a sequentially descending order. How crucial is this? Also, as a follow-up, he mentioned that it might be a template issue.
Yeah, so it's indeed it's an issue you see often on many websites. How crucial is this? Well, I would say again, it's important, not only when you're talking or in the context of accessibility, but just in general, like a search engine crawler who wants to understand your web page and what it's about and how the text is structured, also wants those sections and those headers to be as clean as possible. And if they're jumping all over the place, crucial is a bit of an ambiguous term. Like what does that mean? But it is important to make sure it's a clean structure. And I think historically, web developers used H tags and the different sizes of H tags, H1 up to H6. In their designs, like, this should be a big piece of text, so it's an H1, and this should be still big but a little smaller, so I take H2. Oh no, it looks a bit too big, I'll make it an H3. So that's in the past how kind of HTML or people developing HTML kind of thought and made sure everything looked nice, but it wasn't necessarily easy to navigate. Not much more. There's not much more I can say about that. But is it crucial? I would definitely say, in general, for your website, to be accessible and to be easy to navigate by both humans and robots, to make sure that the structure makes sense when it comes to headers.
Crucial adjacent. We do have another question from Kevin Teely Brewer. So, from the WooRank report, how do I know which page is failing the heading elements? That's a fairly simple one. I mean, the page that you're reviewing is the page that's failing. So if you run into your WooRank review, which Nels is in right now, this is your homepage review. If you want to know if another page is failing these heading elements, all you need to do is pop into the page reviews and review an internal page. And then you can review any page on your website. You can review a product page, an About Us page, an events page, whatever that happens to be. You can make sure that each of your pages are either failing or succeeding for those certain elements. So you can definitely do it at a page level within the tool itself. Other than that, you can pop over to our WooRank Assistant, which is our new feature, where you can actually look at those elements right there on the page level on your website without having to go back into your WooRank account. But for everyone watching, just like full disclosure, that is only available if you're currently a WooRank subscriber. So you can't just like grab that from anywhere. You have to actually be a WooRank subscriber. If you're interested in learning more about that, just shoot me an email after the webinar and we can talk a little bit about that. All right, no, sorry, I took up all your momentum.
No worries. And I just wanted to add to that. If I'm still sharing, I think so. Mm-hmm. For heading specifically, we already had since the early days of WooRank, I think, the heading section, which will list all of the headers you have. So in this case, 1H1. So that's good. That's a good practice to do H2s, H3s. So this will also give you some extra background information when it comes to headings. All right. And then, there's a final one. That's tab index. When people are, using the tab key to move throughout your website, there's another thing. Another kind of element to be used in HTML called tab index. And in a similar way or mindset to the headings, here you can also kind of influence the timeline, I would say, or the path that someone's following. So by setting tab indexes, when you press the tab key, you first go here, and then you go to the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one. Just making sure that the value is always greater than 0, so that your browser knows where to jump when people are tabbing throughout your website. I think Wikipedia is a good example of that. When you press tab, it nicely jumps across all the languages. It doesn't go crazy. Like it just makes sense. And that's the navigation criterion.
I know that navigation specifically can get a little hairy and might be a little overwhelming. So I am just posting in the chat right now a full SEO guide that we have about navigation specifically. So this this guide, visit at your leisure, but it does explain in detail what each of these 5 checks means. So that if you're looking at this and you're like, I don't even know what an access key is, I'm just not even going to bother to fix it, then we actually have this educational guide, so you can check that. Okay, so we do have a few other questions. I'm going to just pop our faces back onto here. So from Lucia, this is by proxy from someone who actually wrote into our support. This is about contrast. So I understand the logic behind it, but I would have to work around my branding colors. Is there any recommendation about this? And this actually is not the first time that I've heard this. So do people rebrand, or is there a way to work around it?
It's not a branding is all a bit of a difficult subject, because indeed people have set their colors in stone and then want to stick to them, which obviously totally makes sense. But I'm afraid, you'll have to work around that fact, I think, and you'll probably you see it more and more, even with bigger brands, like I think even BMW recently kind of rebranded their logo to make sure that, and I might be misquoting this, but to make sure that their brand logo and their brand in general is ready for the digital age. So to indeed, like, it used to be just printed on a car and maybe somewhere on a piece of paper, on an invoice or a manual or something like that. But obviously, people are more on the internet right now. So you see these things more and more, like like brands changing their logo, making it often a lot more flat, like taking out all the color gradients and stuff like that to make sure that it fits a more digital way of thinking about the brand. So obviously, I'm not recommending to rebrand, because that's indeed a costly endeavor. But at the same time, there's no way around. Like if your brand colors are not hitting that ratio, let's say you have a green logo on a white background and it's not hitting that ratio, I think the only way to fix that is work with a designer or somebody with a graphical graphical eye and who can be creative with such things, to look at, okay, how can we indeed work our logo and our branding into a newer website coloring scheme, for instance, and set a few colors that clearly have a good contrast ratio.
For sure. And, if you've been a long-term WooRank user, you'll probably notice that, even our brand has not stayed stagnant for the 11 years that we've been in business. It has, like, even minutely, it has kind of evolved with what is popular and what works best, against, like Nils was saying, with different gradients, and try to make it a little bit more modern, a little bit more saturated. So a brand overhaul isn't necessarily what you need to do. It might just be like a couple of tweaks, making the green a little bit more saturated, making the white background a little bit more like maybe cream instead. So it's not like, oh, now we got to start from scratch, we got to go back to the drawing board. It might just be making like little design tweaks, and then you'll see that ratio turn green. Okay, so you are a quiet bunch today, my friends. Not too many questions here in the, how do I take this out? In the chat today. So we just have one last one from Kim. Kim said that she just won a grant for an e-commerce website. Well done, Kim. Way to go. But now she just does not know how to evaluate it. How do you begin? The marketing side of me is going to say WooRank, but obviously there's a couple things you need to do before that. Like, is your website live? That's the first thing, I guess, right, Nils? We would need to make sure that it's live before we can actually evaluate it.
Yep.
But yeah, Kim, I did shoot my email address into the chat if you want to just get started with the conversation with me. But Nils, any initial thoughts about that?
Yeah, or can you be a bit more specific on what you mean about evaluating it? Because there's obviously lots of things when building an e-commerce website that you need to be aware of. Obviously, building the website and choosing the right e-commerce platform, the design, making sure it's accessible, but then also monitoring Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and then of course SEO. Once everything is live, making sure that your website can be crawled by search engines, that you have the right content that search engines like. And that's hyperbole, of course, but there's so much to talk about when it comes to evaluating a website. So if you have any more specific questions, I'd be happy to dive into those.
Yeah, and if we finish before you get a chance to type them, just shoot them over to me via email. I guess we digress a little, but it is important to remember that SEO is not like this list of tasks that you check off and then you can just file it away and just go about your life. Like, SEO is kind of a living, breathing thing, and you can see with our review itself that we are constantly re-adding criteria. We're constantly taking criteria away if it no longer matters. We're changing the way that we score different things based on what is actually useful and what we know either Google is looking for, or we know based on technological advances, certain computers or certain browsers will access things differently. This is a living, breathing thing. This is not like a stagnant list of things that you can do, because it's constantly changing. So how do I evaluate my website is, like Nell said, a little bit broad, but the first step always is just to take a health check. Take a health check on where you stand, get to know your website, get to know the technicalities of what maybe you should prioritize. And luckily, WooRank does have, a priority list where you can filter, okay, what do I need to focus on first? What's going to make the biggest impact? So that's what I would say the first step. But Kim did actually just message another part. So can't figure out how to use Squarespace. Haven't had any sales, only my brother. 2 people contacted me. Okay, Squarespace. Luckily, Squarespace is really easy to use, though. Right, Nils?
It's what you see is what you get, basically. Like, easy to make something that looks nice. Of course, the downside of those platforms is that you have a little less control over how you optimize your website on the technical side of things. They already do a good job, so don't get me wrong there. But there's certain things that sometimes we suggest to do, and it's not as easy to change in Squarespace. But yeah, the fact that you're not getting any sales can of course be caused by lots of things. Is your website indexed in Google? Question number one. If that's the route you want to go, like if you want to get sales mostly through organic traffic, so people searching in Google and getting to your website, obviously WooRank can help with that journey. Just installing, it's not installing, but just using Google Search Console and configure your website in there might already show some things that might be wrong with your website from Google's point of view. So they really share all the information they have on when they tried crawling your website, any errors, issues they came across, or they'll show if people are searching for keywords that you're ranking for one way or the other. Doesn't necessarily have to be at the top, or can be pages down, but they'll show you, okay, your website got this amount of impressions, so people at least scrolled across your website in the search results, and then versus how many people clicked on your search results or your website in the search results. And yeah, the ratio between that, the click-through ratio, if that's really low, it might be, okay, you're ranking for certain keywords. Whether you want to rank for those or not, that's obviously in your context and up to you to evaluate. But if you're ranking on those and the click-through rate is really low, so people are seeing your result passing by but they're not clicking, that might be because the titles of your pages are not enticing enough for a user. So I mean, yeah, and now we're going to get in an endless discussion because there's so much that is important for to be ranked in Google and have many people click on your website. But yeah, like you suggested yourself, it's probably easier to reach out to us, and we have a couple of really good experts on board who can kickstart your project and help you find visitors.
Definitely. Okay, so Kim, I'll look out for your email. We do have one other question about accessibility. Nels, if you have time for another one. Since we're speaking about accessibility, I think browsers and operating systems need to lead the way, as this is the first layer humans and bots interact with. What are your thoughts on this?
Interesting question or thought. I think when looking at operating systems, my feeling, and again, I'm mostly exposed to Mac operating system, a little less to Windows, but I think, and there's probably lots of similarities between the two, but I think operating systems are already doing a good job as far as they can to constrain application developers into using certain coloring patterns. So they already kind of provide out of the box UI elements and UI styles to make sure that contrast is high, accessibility is high. Even now with the hype of dark mode and light mode, so making sure they're never entirely locking it down, because you can still go way overboard with having your own UI and elements. But generally, when you program for an operating system, an application for an operating system, and you stick to the rules of the operating system, you should be good to go. Of course, on the internet, it's a lot less so. Browsers don't necessarily at this point make any or force you into anything like HTML. Like, the world is your oyster on the internet. Like, you program whatever you want into in HTML. Obviously, browsers do give you some tools in the tool belt to make sure that for certain users or certain ways to use and navigate the website, you can annotate certain HTML elements to help users. So the tools are there. It's just up to you or up to website developers, people making websites, maintaining websites, to use those tools and to use those tools in a correct way. And that's what we then, and across other tools like Lighthouse, try to help with, to evaluate a web page and see, okay, you're using the tools, but you're using them wrong, or you're not using them. Ideally, you should be using them. So that's what all those rules are for. Is it the role of browser builders like Google and Microsoft, to name two, to be more strict with the use of that tool set? I don't think so. I think they should leave it way out in the open. Like, you can do whatever you want. If you want to put white text on a white background, that's weird. But if that's something that makes sense for your use case or for your website's use case, then why not? But of course, people won't be able to read it. So that's again totally up to you how you want people to experience your website. So that's my point of view on the question.
Okay, I think there really are not that many other questions rolling in at the moment. If we didn't get to your question, or if you think of something later, you can always email me, or you can drop them in the comments. It'll just be at the same link, so we can visit them anytime, and we'll try to give you the best answer that we possibly can. As we've mentioned, this is kind of an evolving thing. Not only is SEO just constantly evolving, but we'll also be adding to our review as always. But whenever we add stuff to our review, we will always let you know. If you're subscribed to our email list, then we'll always let you know that we've added new criteria. So you can come in and you can check if you failed or if you passed. And if you have problems with that, you can always contact us. Now, at the end of the month, I will be doing another webinar with our friend Adam. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, it's going to be a little bit earlier because poor Adam is in Australia and we don't want to make him stay up this late. So it's going to be at 12 p.m. Central European time. So yeah, Central European time, 12 p.m. So that's like 6 a.m. New York, but you can always watch it on the same link. Anyway, that's going to be May 26th, and we're going to be going into more of the practicality of what we talked about today. So showing a few more examples, what this really means, how you can check for things like this, what certain examples look like. So really just taking more of a practical view over the technical stuff we talked about today. So be sure, don't miss it. We'll send out some emails with some reminders. And of course, like the channel, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and then you'll just automatically get a notification when we're about to go live. Any other final thoughts, Mills? Final thoughts for anything?
No, I think one rule that we keep repeating in all of the contexts that we're talking about: do it for your users and Google will be happy, and the other way around. And that applies to accessibility too. Like if you have a good looking website, good contrast, easy to navigate, easy to read, users will be happy, Google will be happy. If Google's happy, users happy. It's that's the way our business goes, I guess. SEO and just digital marketing in general. How people consume content on the internet. Do it for the users.
Yeah, there's no magic formula, but if there is a formula to follow, that would be it. Do it for your users first, Google secondary, and everyone else. But all right, well, thank you for watching. Thank you for being engaged and asking questions and stuff. And we'll be back on May 26th. We'll see you then.
Bye.